Alrighty, welcome everyone to the Grower Coach Garden Show. I'm Ken Salvail and I hope to earn your subscription today. Today we're going to be talking about a few different things. We've got an opportunity to go out and have a look at a greenhouse in one of our good friends and colleagues' properties. So we're going to go out to see Don Burnett's greenhouse today. And also, we're going to do our normal show. We're going to talk about a few gardening questions that we have that come in, as well as a few garden tips that we have. So again, we do invite you to send in emails anytime. You can just send them in to ken@growercoach.com and ask any questions you have. Also, if you have tips and ideas that we can do on this show that you might appreciate, or you think it's a good direction for us to go, just feel free to send those in. We really appreciate that feedback and input for sure. All right, so yeah, first thing today we're just going to chat a little bit about just about the seasonality. So right now it is pretty much winter outside, at least where we are here in Canada. It's been awfully mild actually up to this point, but you know, that's good and bad, because the plants outside, they should, you know, they're sort of planning on it being cold, and sometimes when it's not cold, then I don't know if they get really too soft. They shouldn't really be breaking dormancy in any way, but it's almost like I feel like a winter should be more like a more solid winter, where it actually gradually gets nice and cold, just gradually over a couple months, and then it stays cold, and then it gradually warms up. That would be, I would say, the ideal winter. But right now it's kind of up and down. We had a really big snowfall that we had here this fall, where it was so wet and heavy that it broke branches off trees, and all kinds of trees were damaged. Japanese maples, many evergreens, junipers were splayed out and badly damaged. So in some of the shows coming up, I'm sure we'll be talking about that, and maybe even showing you how we try to repair some of those junipers and other plants. Some of them are just not repairable, and unfortunately, if you get a really bad crack or damage in the main trunk, that's pretty much it for that tree, unfortunately. So anyway, we will definitely be talking more about that and the repairs that happen through the winter. Yeah, other things that we're noting right now is that other than the weather, you know, there really isn't much that's in our control right now. But just remember that when you are out in the garden and it happens to snow a fair bit, that the snow acts as insulation. It's one of the best insulators out there. So we can bury up around our plants and things, and it'll really buffer the cold. Underneath the snow, it doesn't vary. The temperature doesn't vary all that much. So just bury up plants like maybe roses and some of your perennials, and even some peonies or specialty peonies, the tree peony types, which are actually pretty hardy, but you can still give them a little bit of snow coverage. And then also, of course, around the perimeters of any houses or buildings where the snow actually doesn't come in, where it's actually prevented from landing, you want to put some snow in around those plants so it adds a bit of moisture to the soil. So that's a good tip right there. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to go to our emails of the week, and we get a lot of emails that come in, and we do invite that. We really appreciate when people send us gardening questions on the email. Again, you can just send those to ken@growercoach.com, and yeah, what I do is I read them up. I usually pick a couple that might be seasonally interesting, or something that just I think might be a good question, and something that I think people appreciate. Whenever people ask questions, it makes us think, and it makes us really gives us opportunities to discuss, I think, whether it's common or a rare problem or whatever, or difficult or simple. It doesn't really matter. There's always people who appreciate to hear those ideas. So yeah, so today we have Derek from Kelowna, BC, who has sent in a question, and he says that last year he suffered, or his trees had suffered from severe powdery mildew in the summertime. In particular, he had a crimson king maple, and the crimson king maple was just white with mildew. Now, this is a pretty common problem, especially in our climate, because we tend to be quite dry and quite hot in the summertime. And this moisture stress is one of these things that stimulates plants. It weakens, like it weakens them somehow that allows the diseases to take more drastic effect to the plant, or more severe. And the thing we note about mildew is that mildew is a disease it's like spores that live everywhere, all around, at pretty much at every moment. They're always around. So what we do with mildew is we really can't do anything about the temperature. And you'll find temperatures, when we get these long ranges of temperature that are between about maybe 18 degrees Celsius to about 25 degrees Celsius. This is sort of a sweet spot for the temperature, and we'll get those periods. It's weather related. You never know when it's going to be, but it's in the month of June for us, or else it's in the month of August. And any plants that might be a little bit stressed out from drought, that just seems to make the conditions even worse. So we can't do anything about the disease being around, and we can't really do much about the weather conditions, but we can do things about the health of the plants. So with trees and shrubs, they really prefer to have an organic sort of composty mulch that sits on the surface of the soil underneath the plant. Doesn't have to be really thick, but about 2.5 to 3 inches thick is usually good. We usually keep the mulch back from the trunk, generally at least a couple feet if it's a bigger tree. Small trees, you have to be back at least a foot. And we leave that area just bare soil, and it's good space there for those roots to breathe oxygen. And that mulch really helps to promote different beneficial organisms, including beneficial fungi, that will live in and help to strengthen the root system of the plant. So that's one of the things you can do, is you can add in mulch. It's been proven to be a big health benefit to trees and shrubs. So some sort of a composty mulch. And then when you water well, water deep, and on certain plants, water regularly. The Crimson King maple is one that actually has dark red leaves. So when you're in a hot climate, dark colors absorb heat, and man, do they get hot in the heat of summer. So that stresses the plant out. And maples are not particularly drought tolerant. I mean, some of them are, some of them aren't, but these ones are not particularly drought tolerant. So they do okay, but they get stressed out in the heat of summer, and this encourages that disease. So what we do now in the winter time is we just have to go out and make sure we gather up all those leaves the best we can and get them right off the property is number one. That can be very helpful. The other thing we can do is we can actually have the tree professionally sprayed. If it's quite a large tree, it's more difficult, but you can use protectant sprays over the winter months, and it's generally a copper spray. Can be done in the fall, during the winter, or even in the spring while it's dormant, as long as it's around 10 degrees Celsius or so. So that's generally a good rule of thumb. Often even the lime sulfur dormant oil sprays that people use in the springtime are helpful as well against the mildew. But again, picking up the leaves, that's really important. It's really super high population of spores at that, from that overwintering leafage. So let's clean that up. So anyway, that's what I would suggest for mildew, especially on these maples. I think that's a really a good thing to practice. So work on the stress, relieving stress from the plants. That's pretty much all you can do. Okay, we got another email that's come in from Karen from Vernon, and she says she was given an azalea this year for Christmas, it looks like, and the leaves are starting to fall off and turn brown, and she asked what should she do. And so Karen, it's one of these things that the flowering azaleas, I think, are one of the most beautiful plants that you can ever have indoors. They're just so incredibly gorgeous. They're Japanese azaleas. They're generally grown specifically for the floral industry as an indoor potted plant. Their hardiness ratings, there's a lot of different varieties, and some of them are okay to put outside afterwards, but most of them are kind of sensitive. They don't really want to go too cold in the wintertime, not below about maybe -5 degrees Celsius. So that is just a little bit of consistent frost. But again, you don't always know what the heritage or the parentage or the provenance of that particular azalea is. But when you get these plants, the one thing that you want to note is that they really appreciate consistent moisture. If you have an azalea plant and you want to keep it happy, You know, usually I never suggest to leave plants sitting in trays of water for long periods of time, but the azalea is one that might be one of these plants where it might be an exception to the rule. They just really don't like to dry out. And sometimes if they just dry out even once and they really get bone dry and you grab it and soak it in water, sometimes that plant can barely recover. It'll still lose the majority of its leaves and it'll be a struggle really to get that thing back to health. So azaleas are tricky. The ultimate key is water, 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 water. I generally give them a little bit of water every day. Keep them consistently moist, and every once in a while right into the sink in a good rinse through, really good thorough soaking, and you're good to go. The azaleas, they love the acid soil conditions, and they bloom in the fall typically, or in the spring, so they really like to have that sort of dormancy period in early fall. So this would be like some of the rhododendrons. You'd see the buds being produced in the summer and then the blooms opening in the spring. Because they are sort of not very hardy, they're not used to having very cold winters, so they're almost easily fooled into blooming. And so this particular plant is one that's sold because it can be forced into bloom for different seasons. So it's a great plant, one of my favorites. I've only successfully had one last for, at one time I had one that went through about 3 years. So I actually got it in bud, took it to bloom, grew it through the summer, cooled it down in the fall, cooled it right off till it was literally dormant. Then the buds formed really nicely, and then I brought it back, it bloomed. So I was able to keep it alive for a couple of years, but I swear I had no life then. So it was like, it was one of my babies, and I sat it right beside the kitchen sink. I had a big window there, and I could just keep feeding that thing water every time I went to the sink. So that I thought was a pretty lucky situation, but it didn't last. And even I, forgot to water it a couple times, and that was it. It couldn't handle the conditions for too long. All right, so just a quick topic today. We're just talking, because it is winter time, that the days, at least in Canada, are getting really short right now, and so we need extra light. So the one thing that we can do is we can add grow lights. So grow lights can be pretty much anything. I actually have some pretty cool fluorescent lights. They're like the spiral fluorescents, and they're actually a grow light. I think they're about a 75 watt, and I put them into fixtures that have like a metal round reflector on it, and I can put 2 of those on a table of plants. Fabulous idea. It really helps to promote that extra light that's missing at this time of year. So what I do is I really want my grow lights to be happening in the first part of the day. That's when it's most critical. The end of the day is not as effective, but within the first 90 minutes of each day, that's when you want to supplement your light. That's the key, most important part. So wintertime plants really need that light, so that's always a good thing to do. Add some sort of supplementary light. The LED fixtures that are available now are great. They come in a real wide array of products, so check those out and give them a try. I'd say anything is better than nothing. Incandescent lights, not so good. Fluorescent lights, regular ones are generally not so good. Like, they're okay, they're passable. But if you do use whatever you have, it's ideal if it's actually called a grow light when you buy it. That's one of the keys, because it'll send out a spectrum of light that those plants really, really like. All right, so that's it for this part of the show. I really appreciate you tuning in. We've got an opportunity today to get out to Don Burnett's greenhouse, and we're going to go have a look at his layout. He's got some pretty cool stuff going on there, and he's doing something different. And at the time when we were shooting this particular video, was just before Christmas, and it was his goal to have Christmas tomatoes in his greenhouse, which is pretty much unheard of. I find it's a difficult time to try to get tomatoes into a greenhouse, but what a great opportunity to check out what he's got going on there. He's got some grow lights, he's got a bunch of cool plants in there, and so just tune into this, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, so I grew up in the industry. I was born in 1950, but my grandfather had started a business in 1922 in Kelowna, and he built their first greenhouses in 1932. and they grew greenhouse tomatoes right through. We grew them right through till the mid-60s, and then we kind of got really heavy into the bedding plants and things like that. So we stopped growing fresh tomatoes, other than a few, just for novelty kind of thing. So I grew up with these tomatoes growing in the greenhouse, and my goal this year, now that I have this greenhouse, is to have a winter crop. My grandfather and dad tried in the 30s and 40s to grow a winter crop, but it just wasn't successful, mainly because they didn't have the light. Short days in the winter are not conducive to greenhouse crops.
Yeah, minimum night temperatures we've talked about a few times, that having that temperature control and tracking and technology these days is fabulous.
Yeah, well, it is. It's fabulous, and so now when you go to the grocery store, you can buy BC greenhouse grown tomatoes in the middle of the winter. So that was my goal. This is a tomato variety called Cobra, and I get the seed from Stokes Seed in St. Catharines, Ontario.
Are these both or all three?
All three are Cobras. There's three plants here, and they're all Cobras. I was growing a variety called Comete, but this is so much. The seed is so much less money. The Cobra seed for 25 seeds is about $17.50. For Comete, it's $45 or $50 for 25 seeds.
Wow, yeah.
So, and I had a friend of mine bring in some Cobra tomatoes to eat last February, March, from her greenhouse, and they were delicious. So I thought, you know what? Being a little chintzy, a little Scottish background, I backed off. But I think I'm going to try some Comete too. If they're that expensive, they got to be good, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, these are really forming up nicely. If you want to have a look here with your camera, and we've got some really nice trusses forming here of these Cobra tomatoes, and lots more on the way up here, all the way up.
Yeah, and some inside here. There's all kinds of them going.
And what I do with these, if you notice, these are on, hanging on strings, just like my dad used to do in the greenhouse.
Yeah.
He didn't have these fancy little clips. These are quite a specific clip to clip on the string. Lays in here, and so when you push this together, it clamps the string tight. So when you do that, now the string, it's clamped on the string, and this is just, so you can see here, it's holding up nicely.
Yeah, it's actually a tomato plant clip.
It's made for the purpose for that.
Yeah.
And
I think I still have a bag of those, and I just protect them. Anytime I want to grow tomatoes, this is definitely the way to do it, with the string wrapping around the stem as it goes up and gives that support. You've got a clip about every 10 or 12 inches.
And if you don't prune out the suckers, you could have, amazing amount of tomato plant growing up here. But I prune out the suckers in here simply because there's just no elbow room. So we just got a tomato plant coming straight up. And at some point, when this guy gets up another foot or two, I'm just going to cut the top off.
Yeah.
Because I don't want it to just go all over the place. I just cut the top off and focus on the crop that's on there.
Yeah. Because these are indeterminate variety.
Indeterminate, yes.
So they just will keep going and producing and growing and producing. So determinate varieties actually will hit a certain point and then stop, and that's it. So these are ones that you have to put an end to it when you're ready by snipping them off.
Now I mentioned my dad and grandfather started their business in 1932, the greenhouse part, in 1932. And this is the box they would pack their tomatoes into one of these boxes, and that's an actual box from back then. It's made by Simpson Sawmill in Kelowna. We bought all our what we call shook and bands and things like that from Simpson Sawmill, and they would put, I think there was, would that make sense? 5 pounds of tomatoes in this, and there was 4 of these in a case.
Yeah.
So there was basically 20 pounds of tomatoes in a case.
That would make sense. Yeah.
And then they switched from here. When I was a youngster, I remember them switching from here to cardboard, cardboard container instead of these wooden ones.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to, once I get this crop going and get some tomatoes, I want to pile some tomatoes and take a picture of it.
Yeah. Well, especially like right now, we're in November right now. We're right about the middle of November.
Middle of November.
So yeah, I think we'll have to check back and see how.
I got some cucumbers. These are called Carmen. Fabulous cucumber.
This is one of the best cucumbers.
And they're very prolific, very productive, and they're gynoecious. They need no pollination.
Yeah.
They're really, really a good plant. And I'm going to have those growing. I got a little spot reserved for them here, and I'll have cucumbers coming up. I didn't get them until lately because I didn't have the seed. And so I got my stoked seed in now. So there you go. That's the tomatoes. And I'm going to be having, I got a couple little pepper plants started.
Yep.
And I'll have some lettuce in here as well. I have it hanging off the...
And the light, you're just using, how many watts is this? Is this
I don't know that, Ken. I can't tell you, but it's
like
a good strong light.
About a 400 watt maybe? Or something like that?
I would say that, yeah.
High pressure sodium?
Yeah, it's high pressure sodium, and it's got this
controller.
Well, it's the...
like a voltage.
Yeah, it's a voltage regulator thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not an electrician, so I can't talk that language.
It's got
plants I can talk about.
Yeah.
Electricity, man.
And as far as food goes, you just feed them.
I've been just using triple 20.
Yeah.
And I can show you my triple 20
water
bucket
soluble.
out there at some point. I can show you the bucket that I have for injecting the fertilizer into my water. Every time I water, I do have a tap out there with plain water, and I have a tap with fertilized water.
Right.
And so, every time I water, I've got fertilizer in it.
Perfect.
Just like we used to do back in the old days.
Like the old days.
The old days. Yeah.
I love that.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here is emulate. When you grow up with greenhouses.
Yeah.
My good old friend Charlie Faulkner said to me, he says, "A Burnett without a greenhouse is like a shotgun without a duck."
Yeah.
So here you go. We got ourselves a greenhouse.
All right. Well, it's pretty interesting stuff for sure, and it's I'm thinking about when we used to grow years ago back in the 80s, we used to grow we had a hothouse cucumbers and tomatoes, and we would grow them in like a hydroponic situation in pots that were 2 gallon size, so about this size, all the way up. Literally, they were watered about 5-10 times a day with the hydroponic mix, and they would grow right up to the rafters and grow back down again. They were phenomenal, but they had no ability to survive without that constant water. So it was literally hydroponic.
Constant liquid feed.
What a cool concept.
There was a concept I saw in Olds, Alberta when I was there at a session, and the gentleman was talking about the way they were doing their hydroponics. It was called nutrient film technique. And it was a black tube that was flat.
Yeah.
And it had a hole every 2.5 feet or 2 feet or something. And they put the bare root tomato plant right in there. So there was no material. It was just, they just flood those tubes.
Right.
Flood the tubes. Nutrient film technique, they called it.
Interesting.
I don't know if it ever flew, but it was interesting. So I got a lot of tropicals that I put outside on my wall. I've got shelves that I've made that I put on my fence and whatnot. So I take all of these guys out in the summertime. By the time you get into early May and there's no chance of frost and we watch the weather like a hawk, we can start easing these guys outside. And most of them will take cool evenings, and they actually enjoy it out there. And I've got everything from this jacaranda, which grows like heck, so I pruned it back to bring it back inside here.
Yeah, it must have been about 12 feet high there.
Oh, it's huge, huge, yeah. And I've got some cycads. This is a cardboard palm that I've had for a couple of years now, a few years now.
Yeah.
And I've got another cycad up here, this sago palm.
Yeah, sago. That's grown quite a bit.
Yeah, it's done quite well. And I've got some Madagascar euphorbias. This one here is called the jewel of Madagascar. Called Madagascar jewel, I think.
Is that the Lucanera?
No, I've got a tag in there somewhere.
Yeah,
but anyway, and it blooms, but it blooms tiny, tiny blooms. You can't even see them. See? These are the blooms right here. See?
Yeah.
This guy's in there. That's the bloom. And they're quite seedy. They send seeds around.
Huh.
So you get a little baby.
Oh, you do, eh?
Yeah.
So the seeds are viable.
Yeah. And there's that guy. He's from Madagascar. I just love Madagascar plants. I mean, you and I are going to go to Madagascar someday.
Yes, yeah. One day we will. Yeah.
This one's from Madagascar as well.
Yeah, that's...
And that euphorbia started blooming in the greenhouse last January.
Yeah.
It never stopped all summer, and it's still coming on. And it almost so I don't even come in and deadhead it. It just kind of the blooms just drop and rot away. It's a beautiful plant. Just a beautiful plant.
Yeah, the blossoms are huge. It reminds me of the old crown of thorns.
Well, it is basically a crown of thorns, isn't it? But it's a type.
It's a giant blooming one.
Yeah.
So I remember the ones we used to have had the little small blooms on
Look at
them.
the thorns on that baby.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing plant.
Yeah. And so lots of different, I've got a couple of different gasterias.
It's a nice.
That's an alowadia.
Alowadia.
It's an alowadia. That's this, and the plant that I'm looking for, that
Pachypodium.
Pachypodium, are relatives.
Oh yeah, I love Pachypodiums.
Related.
That's a cool plant. Maybe we'll get them. We'll get them at the same time.
And tons of different of the jade family. Crassulas.
Crassulas, yeah.
Like this. The interesting thing is, this is a crassula, and that's a crassula. Two different crassulas.
Yeah.
And
This is a jade plant family. Right?
it's jade plant family. Yeah. And this is another crassula behind here.
Yeah.
There.
That's such a beauty.
And
blue leaves.
and of course your common jade. That's another crassula.
Yeah.
This is Buddhist temple.
Yeah, pretty cool. Is this another alowadia?
Yeah.
That's just a larger specimen of that
Look what
one?
just fell off.
Uh-oh. You know what happens to that?
And this is the regular jade plant. Oh, big crassula.
Yeah. Yeah, mine at home, it's got a trunk about this big now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
It weighs about 150 pounds.
I'm gonna have to build another greenhouse, Ken.
Yeah, I've got the geodesic domes now starting, but they're gonna be utilized. But I'd love to have a tropical
There's a
house.
little baby. Gasteria.
Gasteria is very cool. I have a few of the blue ones that are pretty cool. And I think you gave me one of these at one point. Is that the mother plant?
That's the mama.
Yeah. Gasteria, do you know which one this one is?
Yeah, it should.
Gasteria palancii. Variety palancii.
Yeah, it's just crazy how many plants there are.
Interesting.
I remember you saying to me one time, Ken, there's just too many plants.
There's just too many plants.
There's too many plants. Now here's something of my pride and joy. And we don't know how long it will be my pride and joy because I could kill it.
Oh yeah.
But I just got this from Brian Minter. $50 plant
Yeah.
from Brian Minter. This is a vanilla orchid. That's what they make vanilla from.
Yeah. The seed part.
And it's a vine. And it's happy. Look at that little rootlet grasping on. Look at another rootlet coming there grasping onto that stake.
Yeah. It wants to climb.
And it's in pretty much gravel.
Yeah.
And so it feels moist because
Feels heavy.
I usually test plants by their weight.
Yeah.
Like this one here, this guy is ready for water. He's light as a feather, right?
Yeah.
This guy is not light as a feather, but because it's gravel,
Yeah.
it's not wet.
So they're actually an epiphytic
They're epiphytes.
variety. So
They're epiphytes, and they need, but it loves to be moist. It's a moist epiphyte.
and there's some secret to pollinating to get them to actually produce the seeds. That is, our friend Dan Bruce will have to teach us.
Well, we'll have to,
He'll have to help us figure out how to pollinate them.
Yeah.
But that would be so cool to get to the point where we actually have beans.
Yeah. And another great group to collect is your Sansevierias.
Yeah, Sansevierias.
I mean,
Look at
there's some real beauties. I mean, look at this baby.
that is
Yeah.
insane. It's crazy. Starfish Sansevieria.
And you can see why.
It's like Sansevieria cylindrica are these ones that have the sort of tubular leaves.
Yeah.
And you have a few different cylindricas.
Yeah, I got a little baby one here.
Miniatures, small varieties.
But this one here, that one's having babies.
Yeah, pretty cool. Another cylindrica. Sansevieria cylindrica.
Yeah, there's tons of them too. There's tons of them. You know,
It's a big family.
yeah, huge family. This, believe it or not,
Yes.
is an opuntia.
Yeah.
That's an opuntia,
Opuntia, yeah.
which is your typical, your prickly pear cactus family.
Cactus,
Yeah. But this one's not hardy, of course. And these little guys here, I just kept going in there and clean them off after
After they will.
I think it's so
leafy.
cute.
It is. It's pretty cool.
It's a cute plant.
I love it.
And it's nice because it hasn't got the spines that a lot of cactus have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
There we go. Crash,
Good.
bang, boom. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. And I got some orchids happening here.
Yeah.
Dendrobiums.
Maybe I'll switch your places or...
Phalaenopsis that I've put into a little cage here. I'm experimenting a little bit. I saw this on the internet.
Yeah.
And basically, to water it, I just stick it into a bucket of water and let it soak for a bit, and then bring it back out. And I just planted this not long ago in here, so it's not quite established, but it is going to grow. It's got a nice new leaf on it.
Yeah. Typical of these Phalaenopsis is they will grow, they'll shed their roots often each year. So they'll grow a new set of roots each year so that you can prune out the old dead ones and let new ones grow back.
This is Dendrobium.
Yeah, Dendrobiums are very cool.
I'm trying to get them to bloom, and they say they bloom off these little pseudobulbs.
Yeah, pseudobulbs.
These pseudobulbs, they're supposed to shoot a bloom up through there, and I've had these for 2 years and haven't bloomed yet. So
We're still waiting on that.
they're saying, not the green bin. Don't put
You
me in
would
the
never
green.
throw
Don't
it
put
out.
me in the green bin. And of course, I love these guys.
Yeah, the Bocarnias.
Bocarnia incurvilla, or whatever incurvilla.
Carvelia.
Yeah. It's the
The recurvatas.
recurvata. Yeah. When I was in Florida in 1976,
Yeah.
I went to the Edisons, and if anybody ever wants to see a beautiful garden and a beautiful historical place, it's in Fort Myers, Florida, the Edison Museum and Botanical Garden.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of Edison as being a gardener. But the reason he has a botanic garden down there is that he was commissioned by Roosevelt to find a source of rubber.
Right. Yeah.
Because the rubber was all coming from some of these areas that Japan had kind of taken over, and so their source of rubber might have been in jeopardy. So he searched the whole world and brought plants home to find this rubber, and that's where the Botanic Gardens came from. And weirdly, he eventually found he could make rubber out of goldenrod. Common goldenrod, he was making rubber out of that. But of course, they never had to do that because we won the war.
There you go.
But in that Botanic Garden was a Bocarnia that the base of it was 4 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
Came up beautiful like this. And I've got my parent Bocarnia here, the mummy of my Bocarnias.
Yeah.
Right here. That I keep outside in the summer, of course.
Yeah. Strong.
And it's getting to be quite a good size.
These leaves can be sharp too, eh? Very, very pretty plant. I love these things.
Yeah.
Mine, I've got the one actually, you and I back it was in 1988, and the old days, and we did a bunch of different videos and stuff. And the one, I don't know if we had a video of it, but I remember we got in these Bocarnias, and there were 3 in a pot.
Yeah.
A small, medium, and a large, right? And so I was like, I had to have one. I was just like, I'm getting one right away. So got one of those, and you know, I still have it. And the big one's got a base about like this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's about 8 feet, 9 feet high. Well, it's 8 feet. It goes right up, pushes against my ceiling. Then the secondary one is fairly big. It's about this high. And it's got a base about like that. And then the third one is one I chopped off, or it actually got broken off one time we were moving. So it's split into 3 or 4. So I got the multi, the medium, and the large.
Well, where I got mine was at Brian Minter's garden center.
Yeah.
And it was in a 4 and 5 inch pot.
That one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was in a 4 or 5 inch pot, but there was 20 of them in there. Tissue culture.
And that's one of
Tissue
those ones.
culture.
I remember when
that's one of those. That's the original ones that I got.
Isn't that something? So you split them all up?
Split them all up. So the last one I got, those are the last of my Bocarnias that I split up.
Those little guys in the corner there, yeah. Oh, pretty cool. These are the little Bocarnias that were offshoots from the other one.
And they weren't really offshoots. They were, like I say, it was tissue culture, and they must have had a cluster of them. Cluster, and they plunk them in, and they do that quite a bit with tropicals now.
Yeah. Well, I know you can buy them, like when you buy tissue culture, you buy a little tray, and it's just full of grass. They just say it's guaranteed to be 800 or 500 or whatever it is at least. But I don't think they actually count them. But pretty interesting. And this guy you were saying was an interesting little plant.
Yeah, that's a brand new plant on the market.
It's not it's a new type of plant.
It's a cross between an agave and a it's called a mangale, cross between a manfrida and an agave. So they call it mangale. So they made a new genus, actually.
Oh.
Just like they did, Ken, with the heuchera and the tiarella, the heucherella.
Heucherella, yeah.
And that was in the early part of the century. They made a whole...
That's pretty cool. And these Haworthias are just super cool.
Are great, eh?
Yeah, I love them. They're just such an interesting plant.
I just got the two types.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of different types.
Tons of them, yeah.
You can collect them.
Yep, this one's having babies.
Yeah, and they really like to dry out, these guys, in between water, that's for sure.
It is a little baby. This is a baby of that one.
Oh, yeah. I love those. They're just like tiger stripes on them. Pretty cool. Well, a lot of succulents here, that's for sure. So,
and they're becoming so popular. I mean, back in the day, you know, in the days when I had the garden center in the nursery, succulents were around, but not the way they are now. It's a huge industry now.
The living stone plant. Lithops.
Here's one of those euphorbia. Euphorbia Madagascar jewel. Euphorbia leuconera. Leuconera. And you saw the mother plant back then.
Yeah, and you did give me one a few years back, and it was doing well, and I actually dried it out so much that it actually almost died.
Yeah.
And still
even succulents can die.
Yeah, what I look for is the flesh starting to shrink and shrivel, and those Haworthias are really easy to tell because you'll see them be nice fat plump stems, and then they go flatten right out and turn into these little curved leaves, and you know they need to drink.
This is a Crassia lycopodioides crassula.
Nice.
It's a jade plant family.
Yeah.
And this baby I had look at the air roots coming off of it.
Yeah. They're just ready to roll.
You can't kill these, although I just about did. This summer I had it up on my wall on a high shelf, and you look at it, and it looks okay. I keep looking up there. When I took it down, Ken, it was so sick. It hadn't been watered all summer.
Oh.
And it was...
all summer.
Please water me. Yeah. And so I took it down, and I split it all up into and look at them coming on here. They're just growing like crazy.
Yeah, happy little campers.
Happy plants.
Pretty
happy plants.
Those little micro pots. That's cool. Well, that's great, Don.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time today and showing us around a little bit. I know we're going to cut out here for a second, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the infrastructure here in the greenhouse. So perfect. Thanks again. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. Again, Ken Salvail here, and yeah, it was pretty cool checking out Don's greenhouse there. We'll be going back next week, and we'll be having a look at some other parts of his greenhouse. He's got a pretty cool setup there. It's a little bit more advanced, I would say. Again, Don's got a long history of greenhouse production, and he's had all the bells and whistles. Now in his semi-retirement, he's able to implement or integrate some of these cool effects and temperature controls and that sort of thing, which we're going to look at next week. So definitely stay tuned for that and check in then. Alrighty, so just to wrap up the show here today, I just wanted to talk about a new introduction. Each week I like to do a new plant introduction. One that's coming up for the new year. It makes it kind of difficult, I know, because they're not always available. We're going to try to get some of these plants in our hands and maybe make them available maybe through our programs that we have through our website possibly. So stay tuned for that. But at least for today, it's good to see that or at least learn about some of these new plants that are coming down the pipes. And so today's new plant introduction for 2021 is a Brunnera called Alexandrina Alexandria, and that is a beautiful white-leafed, it's literally white or silvery-leafed Brunnera plant. And typical of Brunneras, I find fabulous for shade conditions, quite deer-resistant as well, relatively drought-tolerant. However, you know, they still need a little bit of water. I would call them sort of moderately drought-tolerant. But just one of the more beautiful plants, I would say, for the garden. You can see the picture here, and it's really, I think, going to be a real winner. So again, it's one of these things that I think we're going to try to get some of these plants and see if we can make them available at least sooner rather than later. You know, after a year or two in these new plant introductions become just sort of more regular in the garden centers, it makes life a lot easier. But still good to know that these things are coming down the pipes, and still good to know that there's a lot of really cool options out there that are good. So again, Brunneras, great plants, shady areas, grown predominantly for their foliage. However, in the springtime, they get these masses of little blue flowers, and they're just gorgeous. Nice planted with the dicentras, so the bleeding heart family. Great combination because that nice pink flowers with a blue, almost like a blue mist, you know, from the Brunneras. Really great combination. So check that out, and hopefully we can get some of those for 2021 and not have to wait too long. But great plant, pretty cool. Other little tips that we have is our What Bugs You section, and today I'm just talking a little bit about shore flies. And now a shore fly is a tiny little black fly that flies around our houses all the time, especially people who have a lot of plants in their house. And so shore flies are this little black fly that lives along the shores of waterways and lakes and ponds. And this small fly just needs to be in this constant moist condition. And that's where it likes to lay its eggs, and the little grubs come out. They'll eat sometimes decaying plant material, that sort of thing, around the edges of ponds. So shore fly is one thing that if you overwater, you tend to get shore flies. Also fungus gnats. You get fungus gnats too if you overwater. So in the house, if we get these tiny little flies flying around, I know a lot of people do, we'll often see that's what it is. So that's another reminder that we have to let our plants dry out between waterings. And as long as if you give them a good soak when you water them and then let them dry out, to put your finger in the soil and you can feel it's actually dry for about an inch deep or so, then you're good to re-water it again and give it a good soak. So that's really the way to prevent them, is just by not giving them that wet, soggy shoreline effect that they like so much. So if you don't make the conditions, you won't have the flies so much, and that's the way to go. Other than that, there are sometimes some grub killer products available that are basically a living little organism called a nematode, and those will often work on the fungus gnats and the shore flies if it's applied to the soil. and they're little microscopic insect worm-like guys, the nematodes. A lot of you may know what I'm talking about. And they'll burrow in and consume those little grubs, and that's the end of them. So that's it for today. I just want to thank again everyone for coming out and checking out the YouTube channel here. And again, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, and as well as Facebook and all the other social medias. We have a nice Instagram program going as well. And we're looking forward to doing this on a regular basis. So again, let's check it out regularly. Don't forget to subscribe, and please like the videos. That's fabulous. Thanks again.